I feel like rejoicing over the scripture that God gave to me. I talked to Greg yesterday, and he prayed that I would be shown by God what I need to say today. And I had the most vivid dream ever. I woke up thinking somebody was opening the Bible and pointing to a story. And I woke up in the morning and started researching it, and I got really excited. So I hope it comes through on the video. So I sent you 1 Chronicles 20, verses 1 and 2. You can read along if you want to. That's what we're doing today. The battle belongs to the Lord. And I thought, we can't do anything against this COVID thing. I mean, we're told to do nothing. Stay home and do nothing. So there's nothing we can do except trust in God. And that's the whole point of this thing, is we're to trust in God. So let's read 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 1 through 2. In the spring of the year, the time when the kings go to battle. Now, some of you know what this leads up to, but I'm going to do something different today. I'm going to give you some background to this. In the spring of the year, when the time the kings go out to battle, Joab led out the army and ravaged the country of the Ammonites and came and besieged Rabbah, a city. But David remained at Jerusalem, and Joab struck down Rabbah and overthrew it. And David took the crown of their king from King's head, and he found that it weighed a talent of gold, and in it was a precious stone, and it was placed on David's head. As I tell the background of this story that you don't get in Chronicles, you have to go to 2 Samuel to get the background of this story. I want you to keep in mind that it was placed on David's head. This crown that weighed a talent was placed on David's head. In 2 Samuel, we read the background of this in chapter 10, that the Ammonite king dies and his son takes over. And David sends some messengers to make peace with this new son. He had peace with the father, and he thought, well, I'll send some messengers to make the same peace accord with the new king. Well, the king dishonors David's messengers by cutting their robes off at their hips and shaving their heads. Well, David, of course, gets angry and goes out with Joab to fight. There are two battles, actually. Israel wins both battles. After the first battle, the Ammonite king goes out and hires more Syrian warriors. And it ends up that we have two different records of this battle. Between 700 and 7,000 charioteers died in this battle. So can you imagine going out with your sword and killing up to 7,000 charioteers, not to mention the 40,000 soldiers that were killed. So there's two major battles. It says up here that Joab ravaged the Ammonite country, the nation of the Ammonites. So he ravaged them, he destroyed. This was no small battle. This was face-to-face, sword fighting, club fighting, brutal. 40,000 people, soldiers died, not to mention between 700 and 7,000 charioteers. So I want you to get that in your mind, that this was a serious battle. Well, after this battle, we have David staying at home as he sends Joab out again to fight these people. In the very next chapter, David stays at home. And you know what happens when David stays home, right? What's the name that comes to mind?
Bathsheba.
Right. He committed adultery with Bathsheba. He murders her husband in this battle with the Ammonites. Their son dies, and then Solomon is born. And then we get the story that we just read. Right after that, we get the story that Joab went out and conquered Rabbah, the city there. So they were at Rabbah. As we go back to 2 Samuel, it tells the story in detail of how Joab had captured the city, but then he sent messengers back to David and said, David, come and you conquer this city, lest they say I did it. So in actuality, who conquered? I mean, if I took a poll right now of you guys, raise your right hand if Joab conquered the city, or raise your left hand if David did, and we get 50-50. I mean, like, Joab did it, but David gets the credit, right? So really, Joab was the warrior that went out and did all this, but David gets the credit. Who got the crown? David. David gets the crown. All right. So just keep that in mind. In our battles, Who really fights our battles?
God does.
It feels 100% like us fighting our battles.
Yeah.
But really, it's 100% God. I remember asking my grandpa and grandma, individually, separate from each other, how does your marriage last through the years? And both of them independently said, and I could tell they hadn't thought about it ahead of time, but they said, you give 100% and you get 50%. And I thought, wow, that's insightful, because I think that's the same way with God too. It feels like we're walking through those battles ourselves. And the battles we face, we feel like they're ours. But we know that the battle belongs to the Lord. If we didn't have him in us, with us, we couldn't win the battles. I think Joab here represents Jesus. I just did a quick search of crown in the New Testament. The word crown, like you put on your head, crown. The first 7 or 8 references were talking about a special crown, the crown of thorns that Jesus wore for us. The next 10 or so, we're talking about a crown of life or a crown of righteousness that we get to wear because he wore his crown of thorns. And it also talks about his crown of glory. I want to comfort you to know that the battle belongs to the Lord. He gives us, he wore the crown, Jesus wore the crown of thorns so that we could have a crown of life and a crown of righteousness. James 1:12 says, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. 2 Timothy 4:8 says, henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. What a glorious day. And not only to me, but also all who have loved his appearing. Do you love his appearing? Do you long for his appearing? That's our hope. Revelation 2:10 says, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested for 10 days or so, and then we'll have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Isn't that our hope?
Yes.
I want you to look through, I want to read through Psalm 33. And Psalm 33 was where I was reading in my Bible and planning to preach from if we got the chance this week. But Psalm 33, I'll start in verse 10 for time's sake, really brings this out as well. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. So the wisdom of the nations is nothing. And against this COVID virus, if there's anything that's been said over the news, we don't know much about it. We don't know much about it. We don't know much about it. So the Lord brings the counsel of nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of his people. I know it's got to be so frustrating for our governors and whatever to drive up and down the road and see people out playing basketball or, doing stuff like that, because they're just continuing making it worse. So, but he frustrates the plans of his people. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he has chosen, his heritage. The Lord looks down from heaven and sees all the children of man. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them observes all the deeds. The king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might cannot rescue. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, and those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help. He is our shield. For our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, people of Pine Bluff, even as we hope in you. So go back and study that Psalm 33. Our time is up. Love you guys.
Everybody take care.
Yeah, y'all too. We love y'all.
We love you too.
We love you too.
Okay.
God bless you.